Hi, Stuart. Welcome to Rendering Unconscious. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you very much. Very glad to be here.
Where would you like to begin?
Yeah, well, I was just, I'm a clinical psychologist working in adult mental health, as I announce myself in most beginnings at meetings and things. Um, but I've also got an interest in transpersonal psychology, which is the psychology of spirituality. And coming, back to the Freud bit, I've been reading Freud and other psychoanalytic authors for, maybe 40 years now, but not a trained psychoanalytic, and that's not the way I work in my clinical work. But in the transpersonal work, sort of exploring around spirituality, because, that's one of my core interests is about the relationship between spirituality and religions and how religions form. That's sort of maybe more that's more core to my interest than today. But today I am really interested in. But that's sort of what drew me into that area. And yeah, through that I was yeah, I did some work. A friend who's in into Wicca and writes books on that. But because who she was initiated into that by the secretary of Gerald Gardner, that put her high up in the hierarchy, and people shared with her sort of lots of documents about the development of modern Wicca, and she's also in a similar also got lots of stuff on the Golden Dawn. And she writes books about that. So it was through that kind of um, I sort of started seeing, some parallels, but between some of the practices of the Golden Dawn and some things in psychology, and I started sort of rethinking, some of the concepts or the content of Freud, like around telepathy and dream interpretation, and thinking about, well, a lot of this now is resonating with ideas of the occult, and I thought that was either like a very original stroke wacky idea I'd had myself, but then I discovered actually it's become a bit in vogue. Other people are having the thinking that same kind of area, so I researched it a bit more and developed my understanding a bit more to produce a paper on it. So long explanation there, long introduction, but that's kind of why I'm interested in this topic.
That's what we want. I love origin stories and seeing how things develop over time. So, what do you think about this idea of like Freud and his telepathy experiments and the occult and this kind of becoming in vogue?
Um, well, I mean, let's say I think it's I think when I did the research into it, I found, that how he was more actively researching into telepathy and clairvoyancy than I thought. Because though I'd read, a few of Freud's texts, by no means all, because it's quite a big canon, but I'd read a fair number, and so I was kind of on the basis of that, I'd kind of seen that I thought, this resonates with something else here. But because he wasn't saying it explicitly, I didn't cotton on. But then when I researched and found, some recent work that people have been done, and some a little further back, that no, he was actually more. active in actually exploring these things, and he was, want of a better word, using his sort of his followers, his disciples, to explore it, rather than, him getting too close to it. He was sort of actively encouraging other people to explore and then sending correspondence telling him about it. Whereas sort of I going into researching a bit more, I was still in the position where, I was more interested in Jung because he's very important in transpersonal psychology, and seeing him, um, seeing Jung as putting forward these spiritual ideas to Freud, and Freud going, no, 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 that you don't want to be doing that. So I was aware of that stuff. But then I actually, I became more stuff, about that he was actually asking other people to go and do stuff and find out and let him know, but he was keeping it a bit hush hush, and now, I see, I think, now was that about that, did he, he had ambiguous positions on this, because I think in the in, as a psychologist, so here, but in the world in general, I think people hold ambiguous positions on quite a few things, but we like to think ourselves and other people are more black and white. So I think maybe, Freud maybe might have been ambiguous in his position. So like sometimes believing one thing in a very short time period, and then other times beginning believing others. Or it could be that his position changed over time, because again, that's something that happens with people, that people's, positions do change. Or it was in a modern sort of context. He was about protecting the brand, that he was trying to establish psychoanalysts, can't say it, as a kind of as a product, as a brand in modern terms, and kind of, so trying to sort of enhance its um, scientific credibility, and and and
Exactly.
and not wanting to be associated with this other stuff. And so he was maybe, he was taking ideas and then maybe repackaging them or reforming them through his particular lens, in order to create what he created, and putting it forward as a more scientific thing. Um, though then, because when I'm pondering, the that ambiguity, if it is indeed the case, because because I'm putting that forward as a, as a position, but that might not be accurate. But if it was, then interpreting why that is the case, the question of protecting the brand, did he need to do that so much because spiritualism was so big at that time? I think when he went to America, his ideas were picked up on because of the spiritualist movement, had made quite fertile ground for people to pick up on those ideas. So it might be, other reasons, that he presented maybe more of a skeptical front in some of his works and his public positionings, than maybe, what was going on behind the scenes with his sort of correspondence with people about, have you found another clairvoyant? Oh, tell me about it. What was going on? Or, please, if you have any telepathy experiences in your therapy sessions, let me know. I want to know about this. As opposed to, like in a like, a modern, CBT psychotherapist or something, someone said, like, I want to talk about telepathy today, they'd be going, oh dear,
Hmm.
yeah,
Let's call the
where,
hospital.
yeah, yeah. Whereas Freud, it's like he was like, he was eager to hear about this stuff.
Absolutely. And you're right. It might have taken off even more in some circles because like Jung, that's like Jungian psychology. in many ways, popularly, is bigger even than Freudian at this point because the mainstream culture is able to work with it more and understand the concepts a bit more. It's really seeped in. I mean, Freud has too, of course, but it's really like academia that's stuck to like Freud only really through Lacan at this point, you know? So like maybe he would be more popular in the mainstream if he was open about his interests.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I mean that's a thing in itself, isn't it? About why why Jung is more acceptable and more popular than Freud. What it is about Freud that maybe in some way has made him less popular, and and whether that will change in current times, I don't know. But because there's though it was more well it was Jung who developed actually now I'm telling people who know it, but your shadow selves and that shadow part of the selves. Freud, Jung, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of an optimistic, hopeful, spiritual message,
Mm.
where Freud's is a far more dark and bleak, sort of waiting for Godot message. That
It's
people maybe
true.
find, maybe
Jung's more
people find,
pop and like positive psychology.
yeah, yeah,
And Freud to
yeah,
me is more of a realist.
yeah. I mean, if you read, you read Jung, and you're getting your mandalas out, and you're feeling uplifted.
Yeah.
You read Freud, and it's like, oh, this is bleak, this is dark.
Yeah. Living between two world wars. Mm, bleak
Yeah,
and pandemic.
yeah,
It can be bleak. I
yeah,
think also people are just generally, uh, I think people have so strongly repressed their feelings about their parents and their children in like turn. It's like people who, I mean, I don't have kids, but it seems to me that when people have children, sometimes they get a little bit delusional. In the way they see like children and families and parents, and that it becomes very like idealized. Whereas like at least from my work, there's a lot of problems in families and there's a lot of aggression and their children are sexual. And I don't know how people like pretend that not doesn't exist. It's like, have you ever like hung out with a kid for a long period of time? You know, like I don't know, it seems pretty obvious. But it seems like something happens when people become parents where they're just like, they don't want to see it, they don't see it, and they can't deal with anybody pointing those things out. And I feel like it's so fundamentally, like when people do start seeing in psychoanalysis how they are like reenacting their relationship with their parents, with one or both, or reenacting the relationship the parents had between each other. It's like it's so eye-opening. Like, wow, I've been reenacting this pattern over and over in like an object relation sense. But for some reason, the mainstream just won't. They'll say it as like a joke or a trope, like, "Oh yeah, you end up dating your mother or becoming your mother or something like that." But like, no, but you really do. So like, the only way you're going to be able to kind of live your own life is when you stop kind of enacting those patterns. But most people, I think, just enact them for their entire lives. So.
yeah. I mean, yeah, and then how um yeah, so it is, and how those get into archetypes and that influence people. Because I was having a discussion online with another clinical psychologist about um, the what I see as the bleak times we're now living in, and this person was um, more well sounded more pro Donald Trump, and but that because they were sort of complaining about wokeism and ideas um you know have gone too far, that some of the notions, and she felt that the ground's moved away from where she is, and now she's considered far right, whereas She wouldn't have been in the past, and but she said, like Donald Trump, it's like she said it's like daddy's home, you have to behave yourself. And I just went, I think people have different fathers. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I'm glad
yeah.
my dad's not like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, but maybe it is that thing of like the father figure, that archetype that appeals to some people. It influences,
Putting everyone in their place.
yeah, in the in the wider zone, so I think that's in work environments and all sorts of things. I think some it is like people behave in ways in relation to what they experienced in balanced power relationships, which it is between a parent and a child, but obviously not always unpleasant. But there is that difference in power, that what they learn as a child that then they reenact in the workplace.
Mm.
I've seen that. So people who might welcome authoritarian, punitive bosses because that was what it was like at home, so it's
Mm.
familiar.
Mm.
Compared to people whose homes were not like that, and so therefore welcome or want a different kind of boss figure. But yeah, that's some things I suppose from Freud's work that are still very relevant, like you're saying about um, waking up to like what goes on in families.
Exactly. People are very resistant to it. And I think that's why Freud's not as popular. He like has resurgences and then they're like, nope, put that back away, just like repression. They're like, oh yeah, I remember this. Nope, forget it. We can see the psychoanalytic process. I love it. So where can people find your paper?
It's in the Transpersonal Psychology Review.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's the in the UK, the British Psychological Society, which is not just for clinicians. It's for academic psychologists as well. So anybody who's done a psychology degree and then is working as a psychologist either in a in an applied or a pure setting. We have a section that's the transpersonal section, and we do sort of a yearly conference, and twice a year um, uh, publish a little review. So it's in there. Um, Yeah, and because the transpersonal section's always been, again, it's always been a home for both people whose predominant interest is more sort of spirituality and religion. So things like people with an interest in Buddhism and mindfulness. That's a big strong stream, but it's also been the home for parapsychologists. And often in I don't know how it is in the where you've worked, but a lot of people in parapsychology are often down the skeptic end. So trying to prove that things don't exist,
Mm,
rather than that they do. But I
interesting.
suppose
I haven't
that's
encountered many parapsychologists. Tell
no,
me more.
right. Um, Yeah, well, so. I mean, parapsychology is researching anomalous experiences. So, such as precognition, near-death experiences, um, people who believe that they've seen ghosts. Um, those kind of experiences that might be considered, in another way supernatural. Like I've got a friend who researches poltergeists. You know, and and it is, it's always approaching it with a skeptical position. Um, but I suppose, yeah, it's some people in parapsychology, I think, have gone a bit too far the other way in terms of just trying to understand what kind of people have these false experiences,
Mm,
as opposed to, there might be something in it. Because I think that, you probably need to sit a bit more on the fence. Um, yeah, because I mean, interesting. We know with the name that the Uncanny, there's a TV show and radio show mainly in Britain called the Uncanny.
mm,
I don't know if you've heard of it.
It sounds
No,
great.
which is, um, it's a guy exploring different people's experiences of um, of seeing ghosts, and and yeah, and they have somebody who's um, sort of a an expert, academic expert, sort of in the sort of the occult, and more a believer in those sort of things. And then they have a parapsychologist who's a skeptic, and then they explain, what they've what's happened from both perspectives, and then they leave it to the audience to give their views, and then people email in and message in, their what they're experiencing, and what they think of it, and if they've had similar experiences. And I think what to me this has opened up is that making these things less taboo. That people do have these experiences. It's just the interpretation that
Mm-hmm.
that differs. So through this program, they've had people who've been, and someone will tell their story of a paranormal experience in a particular property, and then somebody will ring up and say, I used to live in that property, or I was nearby, and I've never said anything about this before because people would think I'm crazy, but
Mm,
this also happened to me. So I think it's good that people are, you know talking about this with my mental health hat on, because, you know for we've found now that, say, voice hearing is far more common. And
mm-hmm.
whereas, you know I don't know, 40 or so years back, people were afraid to talk about it because it was equated, like, with schizophrenia. If
Mm-hmm.
you said you hear voices, people would say, you must have a mental illness. Whereas now, through the work of Rom and Escher, initially, that we've discovered that it's a far more common experience. And at the moment, I'm involved in with some research at York University, um, doing researching into people's experiences of visual hallucinations, which again were thought to be, um, only associated that if you're having visual hallucinations, then you've got probably some form of psychosis, maybe a psychotic illness. Whereas we're finding out, actually, a lot more people have visual hallucinations. So not exclusively, but like a really common one is to see somebody who's died,
Mm-hmm.
like the emergence, somebody's done, and so people don't talk about this because it's taboo. And I think that you know there are, say, it's more common, to have these kind of experiences. And if with my CBT hat on now, more, it's the meaning that the person puts on it that then can lead to problems.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think you've seen a ghost, or you've had a precognition, if you by that seeing the ghost, start becoming distressed and anxious about it.
Hmm.
It could sort of, that interpretation, that meaning making of it, the beliefs about it, that could start to push you down a path of more deterioration in your mental health. Whereas if you think this is something that happens to people, it doesn't happen that often, but it's a normal thing, then that's less likely to happen.
Exactly.
Where and if you're a person who has a lot of precognition experiences, if you sort of think, well, this is just something that happens, it's odd, but it happens to other people, then no, you probably maintain good mental health. But if you start going down the beliefs about this means I'm special in some way, or something, some extra interpretation about the meaning of it, then again it can take you down a pathway to more negative mental health. So I'm interested in sort of people, a wider understanding that kind of, we don't know it all, and unusual things happen in the world. And and I don't think that, coming back to the topic, that's something I like about Freud, that he was curious about this stuff.
Hmm.
Though he wasn't public about it, he was like, oh, that's interesting. I want to find out a bit more about that.
Exactly. No, I think it's really important. That's great work that y'all are doing because it's so important to depathologize these things because, and just think of them, like you said, as part of the human experience, instead of there's been so much focus in the past of like, what percentage of people feels this or what's the range and like categorizing everyone and like who's in the middle and that's where you're supposed to be and everyone who's outliers, that's negative and that sort of thing. And it's like, no. This is the human curve. Some things might be more common than others, but this is all the range of human experience. And instead of pathologizing it or labeling people, which, like you said, will just make people like more stressed, which will make them have more symptoms, and then symptoms may take on a more negative form instead of just like synchronicities, for example. If you think of synchronicities as fun coincidences that like make meaning, you're like, oh, that's nice, or something like, yeah, even positive, like, oh, I feel like that makes me feel like I'm on the right track. That's a lot better than being like, oh, there's a synchronicity, and then thinking like, someone's out to get you, or the world is rigged, or like going down kind of a paranoid route. So it's like let's not think that way. Let's accept the range of human experience. And really, for me, the only time I feel like someone's really like suffering is that's when you might want to intervene, or they might need help is if they come for help or if they're really suffering or if they're causing suffering, for others in like a very extreme way. But if people are fine otherwise with their life and they're functioning okay, then like what's the problem?
Yes, no, totally agree. Totally agree. It reminded me when you said the synchronicity, because I had um one recently, where um one of the like my main areas of psychology is with hoarding disorder.
Mhm.
And I'd been asked to do a viva in Wales for somebody's doctorate on hoarding disorder,
Mm.
and so I'd been invited down to Cardiff for that, and it'd been cancelled, and because the student, when we had got it booked, has had some illness, so I'd been not for any particularly negative reason, but it was on my list of things to do which I hadn't done, in terms of contacting the guy at Cardiff Uni, um, about well, actually, it was I was contacting him about. See, this is where I'm transgressing, and there's maybe too much detail, but I was actually contacting him about, because when I'd got the original thing to log on to read the Viva, I'd I hadn't activated it soon enough. Sorry, this is going to be a bit boring for your listeners, this
No, I
amount of
like
detail.
it.
But
These
but
are,
but,
but these
but,
are
but
where the
anyway,
synchronicities come in.
yeah, when it comes, yeah, it's like good comedy. It's the build up. But yes, I was contacting him because the password had expired. So I'd contacted the central uni to say, please send me the password again. And I hadn't heard from them. So I was contacting this guy, clinician, to say, I haven't had it. Could you contact them and speed it up? But it was on my low down on my list of things. But anyway, I was in doing the garden, and I just thought, I'm going in now. Now I'll do that email to the Welsh people. So I went in and did it, and then like this sort of a minute later, an email pops up from the guy I've just emailed, they were sent at exactly the same time. He was contacting me about rearranging this Viva.
Mm.
At the same time, I was saying I haven't been able to get into the site, and also copied into this was Nick Neve, who's the guy who's also doing the Viva. He's an academic psychologist whose field is hoarding, and this clinician. Um, I don't think the clinician in Wales who's all nothing to do with hoarding. It's just that they're a tutor for this student, and I just said, oh, what time did you send this? Because I've got an interest in parapsychology, and I capture all of these,
Mm.
and I send them to my friend Mike Daniels, who researches the poltergeist, just because I'm saying, if we can evidence, finding different ways to evidence these. um so it was like we'd email one another at the same time, and then Nick Neve come back and said, because I saw him as like he's the hoarding guy, and he's also got a interest in parapsychology, and he's part of a group researching anomalous experiences.
Mm.
So he says, why don't you come and join this group? So I don't know how much that is synchronicity or whatever, but it was like that's my most recent synchronicity kind of story.
I love when
Um,
things line up like that. It's so interesting. I haven't had anyone on the podcast either that talks about hoarding disorder. And I wonder what the connection is between people interested in hoarding and people interested in parapsychology.
I don't know. Well, that's the thing because as I said, I said to Nick, I thought I am in this I'm the only person in this intersection. This really weird because not many, and there's other people in it, and I don't think there are many people in the intersection of hoarding and yeah, anomalous experiences. Um, yeah, but I found one other person in the intersection. Um, yeah, but I think Nick might be in the more sort of exploring it in terms of the characteristics of the people who have these experiences rather
Hmm.
than exploring the phenomenon itself. But I don't know. But yeah, so yeah, but I'm not alone in that intersection of
That's interesting.
hoarding disorder and parapsychology. So yeah.
It's always great to find we're not alone. And I find as far as like the occult becoming more popular in general, it's interesting because I did a conference in London in 2016. So I started planning it in 2015 called Psychoanalysis, Art, and the Occult. And we basically put art in there to make it more palatable because when like art's involved, then it makes everything more okay. Like, oh, well, the
Yeah.
artists are doing it, or like artists can talk about occult things and it's like not as weird as if you're just talking about it because you like it, you know? And it worked out because these are like three fields of interest of mine. But when I did it, like there was like, I mean, I'm sure there were psychologists and psychoanalysts somewhere talking about it, but I didn't know any and I couldn't find any, you know? So now, like you said, that there's like more and more when you research it, people that are interested in this and books coming out and things. It's kind of fun.
Well, I think the you know I think what we had said in one of the in the emails to you before this was something that I haven't spoken today in our discussion today is about psychoanalysis or the Freudian form in its continuing influence in culture.
Mm.
That where it might have sort of maybe gone out of favor in sort of clinical settings or kind of yeah, other areas of applied psychology. Um, it's kind of it's had an influence on culture and on on films and like Stanley Kubrick and like David Lynch.
Mm.
The kind of you know um the nearest thing to well, it is really the only films I'm aware of that I can go, oh, that's CBT put into a film is Inside Out. Those two children animated films.
I have
In
not seen those.
Right, right. So they're about it's about a child growing up and about like they're in a cartoon. Their emotions are made into different characters that's in the
Mm.
brain, and they interact with those emotions. And I was like, oh,
That's like
that's a
what they try to
six.
get you to do. Yeah, it's
Yeah, in
easy.
in CBT, whereas like I just think like a David Lynch, any of well, I haven't seen them all, but the David Lynch films and TV is like it's just like sort of like a Freudian just running all the way through it. These kind of like a Freudian dream that doesn't really resolve itself, and that's why there isn't always a clear ending or whatever. But it's these themes that keep drifting around, and the thing of that, that saying the uncanny,
Hmm.
that kind of the doppelganger business, something that looks familiar but isn't. Like, have I been here before? But not, which is you know well, that I don't think the uncanny was a big part of Freud's work. It's a it's a it's a slim, like an essay, isn't it? And most of it is he spends half of it just talking about the definitions of words. But and then an interpretation of one particular story. But I think there's something in that then has you know has run through art and painting. Like you know Salvador Dali being of an obvious one, and but also through um, films like like Kubrick and Lynch, and also in British TV, some of the sort of like in the horror genre, like we have comedy horror, like we had a thing called The League of Gentlemen. I don't know if you got to see it there,
Mm-mm.
or Number Nine,
Mm-mm.
which was so very well worth checking out. Yeah, if you're interested in art and psychoanalysis, um, yeah. I don't know whether the League of Gentlemen number nine might be an easier starting point, but there's yeah, some of the things there, um, kind of around this concept of the uncanny, that's something that's kind of it's familiar, but something's slightly unnerving and sinister is going on here that kind of unbalances me, and I'm not in complete terror from it, but the ground underneath me now feels a little bit more unsteady.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I love that place.
I mean the only link I'd make with hoarding, with it and the uncanny, is that I've worked with a few people, well, female clients who've hoarded what I call scary dolls.
Mm.
Those realistic baby dolls and other dolls, and sometimes I remember once when this person had got too many, so they'd put them outside in the shed, and the roof of the shed had collapsed. So the
Mm,
weather was going into the shed, and all these baby dolls were covered in slime and mold and stuff.
whoa.
So like I opened the door and it was like scary dolls, you know.
That's a
So
scene
so
out of a horror film.
but yeah, but that's the uncanny because it's like it's that kind of sense of yeah, things being perturbing, but you're not paralyzed by fear, but you're like, oh, this is a bit,
That's
like
not
the
right.
Twilight Zone. Yeah, it's not right, and yeah, and yeah.
That's great. Is there anything else you want to say about Lynch, who of course just passed away recently
Um,
in our homage? I just actually had there's a experimental music compilation getting put together on Bandcamp, and so my collaborator Pete Murphy, who's in Birmingham in England, um, put together. I record like I make cut up poems, like cut up text, and I make poems out of them, and then I just record myself reading them like spoken word, and then Pete puts them together and makes like these great tracks out of them. So he just sent me one yesterday, actually, for this David Lynch comp. So I'll put that song at the end of this episode since it's
that'd be
fitting.
brilliant. Yeah, you'll have to reference that thing. I'll that you do. I'll listen a bit more to your music. It'll be good.
Yeah, I
It'll be
will.
good.
I'll send you links. It's pretty fun. And the ones I made for Lynch, like I do it in a magical way. Like they were made, we had like a Zoom Patreon community kind of hangout on January 19th, which was a couple days after he passed. And so we were talking about him. And while we were all like hanging out, I was like making cut up poetry and like um gluing the pieces down into my book. And then the next day was his birthday. And I should also mention the 19th was Brian Geison's birthday, who originally like discovered the cut up method and then showed it to William Burroughs. So it was kind of like a special day. And then the next day was Lynch's birthday. So I made another kind of cut up poem for him on that day. And those are the two that I read and recorded for and sent to Pete for this track. And it's amazing how it kind of sounds like a real nice, like uncanny portrait of him. The cut ups are really uncanny in that way too, because they like it's like I also really like to cut up my own writing a lot of the time. So it's like words and phrases that I use, if you cut up your own writing, since you write, you should try it. It's really fun. Just like cut up, like say exactly like your Freud and occult paper, cut it up into like different lengths, like words. Don't worry about like looking at what you're cutting, just like cut strips, and like throw them into a box. And I use a shoebox, and then you just shake it up and then pull them out and paste them down. And it's like your words and phrases, but like put together in a way that you would never have thought of
Yeah,
because we're
yeah,
like, in our own minds all the time. And so it like, yeah, it like kind of jerks you out of like usual day-to-day way of thinking and gets you to kind of think of things in different ways. And even when I get stuck like writing a paper that I'm working on, like a more academic paper, um, that's what I'll do. Like if I'm feeling kind of stuck, I'll cut it up and like put it in a box and shake it up and like pull things out. And it actually like jogs ideas because it's like ideas for the paper that you're working on. But again, put together in a way you would have never thought to put them together. And that like springs other ideas to mind. It's really fun. I love it. I'm obsessed.